Hello, I'm Karen Oliver, and I'm a volunteer with the Garden Club of South Carolina. I'm also a pretty devoted horticulturalist, and a few years ago I had the opportunity to take a workshop on kokedama, and everybody says, "Coca what?" Kokedama is an ancient art form. It's a variety of bonsai, and it was actually around when King Nebuchadnezzar was building the Hanging Gardens of Babylon for his queen. It is a Japanese word that literally translates to moss ball. And our goal in kokedama is to take a plant and wrap soil, a planting medium around it, encase it in moss, and hang it or place it in an appropriate container. But the moss itself is the container. So what I'm going to do is just go over a few facts about it first, and then we have a display that we'll look at. This is a little bit of educational facts about kokedama. This was an educational program I did for a big flower show one time. So, it can, like I said, it can be displayed as a hanging plant or as in a container. It's been around for a long time. The kokedama first became of interest in the United States back in the, I think it was the 90s. A Dutch floral designer, Peter van der Valk, had learned this technique. He was working on a movie set, and he developed kokedamas, and he brought this and displayed it at the Philadelphia Flower Show, which is, as you know, one of the biggest flower shows in the country. And it became very popular from there. If you go to the internet and search, you will find thousands of suggestions and ideas about kokedama. And there are some different ways to do it. I'm going to demonstrate two containers. One is freely hand formed, and one will be using a bowl as sort of a mold for our plant, because I find I can go a little bit bigger that way. So I think what I'd like to do first is just tell you that this is a really messy technique, so you need to have a drop cloth or be outside. I always try to wear an apron, and I usually, for the first part of it anyway, I wear some gloves. A manicure brush is a very important part of kokedama because you're going to have dirt embedded in your nails, which all us gardeners have dirt embedded in our nails anyway. The components are a plant, a potting medium, and the potting medium is something that you will have to make up yourself. You can't purchase it ready to make, and I will go over those components with you. You'll need some moss. You can use dried moss or you can use live moss. The live moss is a little bit more tedious to maintain because it has to be misted, kept moist every day. It'll dry out. The dried moss obviously is already dead, and so therefore that's usually the component of choice. You'll need to have something to tie your moss ball with, some kind of tying mechanism. If you're comfortable with fishing line, you can use that. My big recommendation is, and this is through experience, to not use jute twine, which is the easiest available. Use instead a polypropylene twine, and you can get creative. If you have a variegated plant, you can find these polypropylene twines in the hardware stores in all different colors. But jute will break down after only a couple of weeks, and then your kokedama might fall apart. Polypropylene doesn't break down. It may stretch a little bit as it hangs. The one key about using the polypropylene is you can't cut it. So put your scissors up. Instead, go buy yourself a lighter or a match. You have to singe the ends of it, and I'll be doing this later. Another tip is that if you are making a kokedama, it helps to have a friend there or a helper, because sometimes when it comes to this knot tying, it gets a little bit tricky holding everything together. So what we do is we assemble our kokedama. Before we do it, I would like to just show you some of the ones that I've put together and how I display them. I found this wonderful outdoor candelabra tree in a flea market, and it's I bought it and just decided it made the perfect tool for hanging my growing collection of kokedama. Plants that are well suited to this are plants like ivy. Some of these palms, this little let's see, this Niet palm This kokedama is probably about 3 years old, and I've repotted it once, and you see how lush and fine it is. They're actually very easy to maintain. Sansevieria, mother-in-law's tongue, is another plant. It's the dwarf variety that does well in kokedama. This is started out actually as one small plant, and it has really spread. In fact, I've had to up-pot this already once because the roots started growing out of the moss ball. And that's how you can tell when it's time to repot it or upsize your container. Dwarf hosta. I love hostas. And the dwarf hostas make a wonderful suggestion for kokedama. They will go dormant though in the winter. Now, I do take my kokedamas in. We have a small greenhouse, so they do go in. I'm in zone 8 around Thanksgiving, so they don't get too cold. But even at that, the hostas do go, so you do have to keep it watered. And I'll go over maintenance of kokedamas in just a minute. Succulents. I'll show you this. This little succulent has been, oh my gosh, it's probably 4 years old now. And I have actually never up-potted it. My string has stretched out a little bit. But I think it's a very interesting little architectural specimen. Really easy to take care of. Another one of my favorite plants. This is in the, it's a succulent, it's called Ripsalis. And this is I potted this up earlier this spring. It will develop a trailing habit, but it's very drought tolerant. And it makes a very, very nice either hanging basket or kokedama specimen. Gosh, you can also mix plants into a mixed container. I put a little sedum in with this mother-in-law tongue, and I've been real happy with the way it turned out. National Garden Club's flower shows with our new guides now allow kokedama as competition in the horticulture division. And so far, I'm not aware that they have a mixed container for kokedama. However, single specimens do qualify. And in fact, with this pink specimen, I won a top award in the Charleston Flower Show. This one's still kind of sparse, so it just shows you that we gardeners have patience and we just wait. This is a little, it's autumn sunset jasmine. And it was just a couple of cuttings that I stuck in there. And so I'm just going to continue kind of wrapping it around and sticking it back in. And eventually this whole ball will be covered. But it's going to be really pretty, I think, in about a year or two. And this Joseph's coat, I think, also really is quite beautiful. And see, I chose to go with the pink twine with this because of the pink variegation veining in the leaves. And that's a nice artistic touch. Anyway, your imagination is the limit. Now, let me talk about the components of the potting soil. Like I say, you can't buy it, you have to make it. Some people have known just to go dig clay out of their backyard and mix a little peat with it. I've not done that. I have a recipe that I follow. One recipe is to take bonsai soil, kokedama, and mix it with sphagnum peat moss, about 50-50. And so that's one way that it is done. This soil that I've mixed up right here, I used a combination of sphagnum peat moss, black cow compost potting soil, and Fafford, which is a soilless mix, and just a little bit of vermiculite for drainage. When you are doing kokedama, you need to be sure that you mix your soils up at least a couple of hours before, preferably the day before. If you've ever worked with sphagnum peat moss, you know how long it takes that to actually absorb the water. And your goal in kokedama is to make a mud ball, make a sticky mud ball. Now, like I say, these gloves are horrible. I like to wear gloves. I'm not going to wear gloves. I like to wear gloves for this part because it keeps my fingers a little bit cleaner. But what we do, okay, so you pick out your plant. Now I have an assortment of plants out here. And I think what I'm going to do for this first one is, and I'll just show you some of the plants that would be eligible. This is one of my favorite. This is a dwarf mondo grass called Bad Hair Day. Isn't that absolutely adorable? It's a dwarf mondo. It's evergreen, tough as nails. You can hardly kill it if you try. That makes a great candidate for it. The small-leafed ivies are great for kokodama. And then you can go to your nursery and go into the little greenhouse section and get some of these very small. The smaller the plant, the better, the easier it is to work with. I know this is a little pepperoni. This would make a very pretty one. And then this is another one. This is a columnia. Also, airplane plants or spider plants make awesome kokodamas. I have one over here. You can kind of see. This one is 4 years old. I've up-potted it a couple of times. It's already starting to grow out of the root ball again, but it's very hardy, very tough, and it's one of my larger ones, so I really like the way that turned out. So I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you how to hand form a kokodama, and then we're going to form one in a bowl. So I think what we'll do, Henry, would you pick out a plant for me? Not this one. Thank you, my cameraman extraordinaire, my husband, who's just recently retired. Okay, with kokodama, the first thing you do, it seems wicked, you take it out of the pot, you remove as much of the original soil as you can, because you don't want it loving its old soil. You want to work the roots loose, so you need to have yourself a trash container at hand. And if it's a little bit damp, it works better. If this soil is too dry or the roots are too dry, they'll be brittle and they'll break. So I'm gonna get a little bit rough with it. I'm gonna knock a bunch of that soil off as much as I can possibly do and untangle it. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stand over my dirt here. And as you can see, my dirt is mixed up. I'm squeezing it. You see, I'm squeezing all the water out of it. But this is the point. You want to be able to compress it enough so that you can throw it. See, you want to make a mud ball. So it's kind of like reverting back to our childhood, isn't it? So I want to take this. I'm going to get a wad of dirt. I'm going to mash it into it. This is a very tactile gardening project. It's really hands-on, so to speak. But you want to work your soil around your root ball. You want to work it in as much as you can. You want to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. You don't want any big air pockets because that will dry your roots out. It'll be damaging. And then when you get a nice compact ball, you work in the next layer of dirt. I have found that I can, by hand, and I know there are people out there that are way better than me at this, get up to about the size of a ruby red grapefruit, if I'm lucky. Maybe a big navel orange. And so before you have to get it encased in the moss. So we're gonna do this. We're gonna keep on squeezing, 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 getting ourselves a spherical shape. This is fun. And I tell you, I saw on the internet one time somebody they had a long dining table for a party, and they had done identical small kokodama balls all up and down the table for their centerpiece. It was outstanding. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take, I have squeezed that. I think I have a fairly compact ball. I have enough to cover my roots. I'm gonna put it in I didn't talk about the moss. This is it's dried sheet moss. It's much easier to work with if you spritz it with a little water and soak it beforehand. So I set my ball in the moss. I carefully fold the moss up around my ball. I may be a little bit tall in some areas, a little bit short in some areas, but that's okay, because this is something that you can piece together if you have too much or too little. So we're going to do this. We're going to squeeze this. this is where it helps to have a friend sometimes. When you're, now you want to really kind of compress this while you have the table that it's sitting on to kind of help you. Now, what I'm gonna, it really helps to wear an apron too. I want to use, what color do I want to use? I've got kind of a pink in that foliage. I think I'm gonna use some pink twine on this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna I'm gonna stretch out about 3 yards to get started with. You're gonna use a lot of twine. And then I'm going to set my twine kind of down the middle here. Now, this plant has multiple stems, so I'm going to kind of help stabilize the plant in the container by tying a knot here. Now, this is where people who have, I tell you, I'm not a good knot tire. Well, the first time I did kokodama, I had to get my husband to help me. I said, Henry, I can't do a knot that, wait, I'm going for this from the wrong angle. I said, I can't tie a knot that won't slip. So he had to teach me how to tie a square knot. So my first knot here is always a square knot. And I have to get that little short in where I can reach it. So you go under and under again. And then you want to pull it as tight as you can. Pull it as tight as you can. And then keep tension on it. Go up again. Go through and through. And then back down. And now you have the beginning of where you can begin to secure this thing. Now, so now, this is where, like I say, it helps to have a friend. But I'm just going to see if I can do this by myself. You want to get your knot tight, and you want to go around all the hemispheres of this. And I have to use my belly with my apron, so you want to go through. See, one piece of moss tried to pop out. So you go around. Okay, sometimes the twine gets like that, so you have to. Okay. The key is you want to go, got ahead of myself there, around. And just start going very methodically and very systematically, wrapping it so that you have literally maybe 1/8 of an inch in between each one of your hemispheres. In that 3 yards that I pulled off, you see how fast it got used up. So now I'm doing like that. I'm gonna try to get some down the middle of my plant again. And after your kokodama is finished and it's watered, you might look at it and go, oh, I missed a spot there. Feel free to go in and add another string and tie it again. I'm trying to, I have a kind of a poochy place right there. I'm going to pick one up there. Kind of a pooch right there. Now, I have another trick to show y'all later about pinched leaves like I've got right there. Okay, so now, can I still find, miraculously, I can still find that loose end that I had. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my match. And please don't burn yourself, which I have done before. Okay. I'm going to find my, remember that was that first little tag that we started with? And we're going to tie this off. We're going to go do our square knot again. And then we're going to do a square knot on this end. This is going to be our hanging loop. Okay, go on in there. My husband is a retired surgeon and he's really good at this. He usually gets drafted for this. Ta-da! So we have a kokodama. And because I probably will enter this in a flower show at some point, I'm going to save my tag. And I'm going to stick it in here so that I can identify it botanically and correctly. But this is going to qualify for low light. And even though some of the leaves got pinched, it's a very hardy plant and it'll perk right back up. So we're going to okay. I'm going to show you another way to display it in a container is you can just put it in something cool like that. You don't have to hang it. All right, now another way to do kokodama is to use a mold. And to do this, what I like to do is I found this bowl that works. I had this bowl, it's too shallow, it wouldn't give me the height I needed in the sides. I pre-cut 4 cords, and I hope I cut them long enough. And I'm gonna lay these in here because you're sort of building the kokodama from the bottom up. Last time we started with the moss. This time we're starting with, we started with the dirt. This time we're starting with the moss. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna get our moss. Okay, Karen. That didn't work so good, did it? Okay, we're not gonna try to do 4 of these strings. We're just gonna do 2 of them. That'll be a lot easier. Okay, now we're gonna, and you can tell that the moss has a kind of a root side and a pretty side. So put your pretty side down so you can fill the soil in your root side. So what we've done is we've just kind of pushed it in there. I made a little hole, so I had to put a little patch in there. I think we're gonna use this. This is a contorted spider plant. I love this plant. I have just a plain one, but this one has a curly leaf on it. So I'm going to quickly remove this, and you see I'm just kind of working it with my fingers and knocking that stuff out. There we go. We got all kinds of good, healthy, white, robust roots. I'm going to put down a bed of dirt. Now, when you do it this way, you have to mash with your hand. You have to. The key to kokodama is to compress the soil. We're going to compress the soil. Then we're going to fill it in. And we're going to make as tight of a fit in this bowl as we can. You don't really need to worry about too much about the depth. I mean, you want it right at the root ball because you can always come back in and add more. Now, I'm gonna show y'all a little trick here that I've kind of learned. When you have something that's got really weepy leaves, I'm just gonna use a piece of this wire here. What I want to do is to hold this up so that I can tie it better. Let's see, let me use one of these. Now, we want to get our thing up here, moss, get our string. We have that string on that side, we got this string on this side. We're gonna go to the side here. We're gonna add a hanging string at a different time so we don't have to worry so much about. I've decided that doesn't work. First time I've tried that, y'all. So So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tie it as tight as I can. There. Now, my string's on the opposite side, so to speak. That's on that side of the root ball. I'm going on this side of the root ball this time. And I'm going to tie another knot because I've got my moss all pulled up. I might need to plug in a little plug of moss right here where it got short. Now you can watch tying this knot. Tight. Keeping tension on it. Getting the leaves out of the way. There. Okay, now I've got it secured enough that I can begin to work with it some more. So I'm going to get my twine, except that I can't find my tan twine. Okay, so we're gonna switch here to black twine because I think that was the end of my tan twine. So we're gonna get rid of these. And when these things get a little bit wet, it takes them a lot longer to melt. If you didn't melt your polypropylene twine, it would frazzle. It would unravel. What do you call it, Henry? Unravel? Okay, so what we're going to do here. Another real handy tool to have in your Kokedama kit is a small crochet hook, because that way when you're trying to run, if you have to run one thread under another for joining them, you can use your crochet hook to do it. So we're going to do this. We're going to tie this different thread to this using our square knot, and now we're going to commence with our wrapping. And I may leave these, you know, I may leave this as a hanging hook. I'm going to go ahead, well, tell you what, we'll just put that there. Okay, now, so here's the tricky part. We've got to get this out of this bowl, and it's going to try to fall apart some, but we have our basic 2 lines in place, right? So now, note to Karen, the next time I do this with a plant like this, I'm going to bring a rubber band just to put around all the leaves to hold it. So, I've got a real tight tie there. I'm going to go around all the way across. Move a 1/4 of an inch. Go around again. My moss tried to jump up out of the thing, but get back down there. I'm going to go around again. And y'all, like I say, this is a messy proposition. So, here we go. We're coming along. The one thing I've found lately, I'm having trouble finding this black polypropylene twine. I can find the pink, I can find the yellow, I find them in the big box hardware stores in the rope department. But I've had trouble finding this, and I've tried using fishing line. I have a hard time working with fishing line because it's so slippery. I have a hard time with it. And if we destroy some of these leaves, you know what? This is such a tough plant, it's going to grow back out. So, and my handy filmer is going to help me with a little, there. Thank you, darling. All right, now, I want this to hang kind of like that. So I'm going to use my crochet hook, and I'm going to work this Let's see if I can free that leaf. Okay, I'm gonna work this under some of these strings here. And I just may work it again. Now, and then I'm gonna tie me a hanging loop. Kokedama is a lot of fun, and you can also do really fun things with these, like incorporate fairy garden elements. My husband and I are from Louisiana, and I like to make Mardi Gras kokodama balls. I'll put Mardi Gras beads and fancy balls and stuff on them, and put them on florist wire. So here is another kokodama that got a bit battered in the tying process. I can straighten it out and it'll grow out beautifully, and these are really hardy plants. I hope this has been interesting. I've enjoyed doing it, and support the Garden Club of South Carolina. Thank you.